Welcome to Paco Group's video podcast series. My name is Frank Otero. I am the founder, president, and CEO of the Paco Group. These podcast series are intended to have a subject matter expert share actual project experience and best practices. Our topic today is artificial intelligence, or AI, and its application in the engineering and construction industry. Our subject matter expert is Mr. Pierce Renelson, Vice President, Technology and Innovation at ENTEC Engineers. Good morning, Pierce.
Good morning.
Before we get started, I'd like to give a little background of Mr. Pierce Renelson's bio. Pierce has over 18 years of experience. He's an architect, has worked as a contractor, educator, and technologist. He started architecture at Ohio State and Yale, where he graduated first in his class. He pivoted from architecture to virtual design and construction, VDC, 15 years ago, helping AECO partners strategize and implement digital tools. His projects include the World Trade Center, Path Hall Oculus, LaGuardia Central Terminal, and Microsoft's Redmond campus. He has consulted for owners such as Harvard, Tufts, Massport, and Alexandria Real Estate. He has lectured and taught at dozens of universities and conferences, including Yale, where he developed and taught for 9 years Yale's first fully BIM integrated class. Today, Pierce is Vice President of Technology and Innovation at ENTEC Engineering, where he leads one of the largest VDC BIM departments in the country. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
AI seems to be the buzz,
Absolutely. I think ever since ChatGPT 3.5 came out, you're seeing suddenly everybody's talking about it.
Yes.
And I think it's important to draw a line between what we mean when we say AI. There's obviously a decades-long history of AI, but I think today people are mostly talking about generative AI around large language models.
Right.
Even though machine learning is kind of the boring AI that's been really quietly changing all of our industries for the last decade.
Having been in this industry 40 years, and realizing that our industry has always been slow at embracing technology as opposed to other industries. Do you think that we might be a victim of that again when it comes to AI?
I think so. Well, I'm a little more optimistic about AI than I am about other technologies. The AEC has always been, we have not been kind of an early adopter of really anything. All of our technologies, BIM, CAD, LiDAR, mainly come from manufacturing, aerospace. We're kind of waiting for them to do something with it, and then we figure out if it'll work for us. I think AI has different barriers that will allow us to kind of adopt it a little bit faster. At the same time, there are headwinds that will keep us from moving much, much faster, I would say. Those headwinds are data privacy, data security, professional liability, copyright, intellectual property. A lot of these are all related to what happens when every time you interact with a large language model, let's say ChatGPT, what happens to that data is a bit of a black box right now. We have contracts and agreements with various parties across a project, including the owners, of what's supposed to happen with their data. And if you don't know what's happening to that data, if you're feeding drawings into it or contracts into it and it's going up into the cloud and who knows what server it sits on, or if it could be accessed by somebody else in another part of the world, that's a problem. I think reliability is still not quite there with large language models either, and we don't really get to say, sorry, I screwed up on this contract. ChatGPT made a mistake. We're still professionals who have that liability.
Right.
So I think a couple of those things are holding us back. I don't picture those being resolved any time soon. I think more than likely we'll be waiting for other industries to show us the way. I think the medical industry is probably going to show us what will probably push AI companies to figure out what data privacy needs to be. Manufacturing will probably push them to figure out how AI and 3D will work better. But there's tools that we can use right now, and that's kind of what I'm most interested in.
Well, that's interesting because you actually lead, from what you said, one of the largest internal departments, particularly for a small, relatively small organization. It's quite impressive that they have such a large, dedicated research and development group. But where do you see the greatest impact of AI application within the construction industry?
I mean, my perspective is fairly specific. I'm interested in tools that I can use right now with the team that I have right now. That means low code to no code solutions. You know, I have people on staff who obviously know some code, but they're not developers by any means. I'm looking for tools that are going to comply with the data privacy and cybersecurity requirements of my owners. We do 90% of our work is with public agencies.
Is your focus more then in the back office as opposed to field type of applications?
Certainly, yeah. It's back office for us right now. I mean, and I should say, you know, we do a lot of BIM, and a lot of the BIM, building information modeling, that we do is focused on workflow automations like quality control, coordination, and we're seeing really amazing strides in helping us automate those using AI. Not just developing our own kind of custom tools, but also just using it, you know, pulling out, let's say, data audits and things like that, pulling it out and being able to put it in ChatGPT and say, just check all these fields for me. Things that, once again, that we are confident is not going to be a breach of cybersecurity.
But as a thought leader and someone that's very much in a leadership role as far as AI application, where do you see the most impact in the construction industry for AI applications?
I mean, what I'm really excited about now is coding with AI. I think the first wave of AI applications that came out last year, last year there was that, I think Forbes had the article that said just saying AI in your mentioning AI on your company's website made your stock go up 8-10%, something like that. So you kind of saw that happening across AEC solutions, and then a lot of new solutions coming out. I was very skeptical and kind of unimpressed by those. Moving into this year, there's kind of what I would call second wave AI, which is interesting. Coding platforms have been pretty strong, I'd say, for the last year. GitHub Copilot was the first really big one that people were interested in. Devin now comes out, which is kind of a full stack AI developer. We haven't tried Devin very much, but we've had great results with GitHub Copilot because, you know, like I was saying earlier, a lot of what we're doing on BIM projects is quality management, auditing, data auditing for code compliance with these, you know, massive public agencies who have specific BIM compliance requirements. So being able to kind of write scripts for that is huge for us. And we're seeing that the turnaround now for a script is much, much faster than it used to be. And in some cases, not scripting at all. Just saying, like, here's some data, putting it into an LLM and having it kind of clean up or find the issues and then reformat it.
Well, the availability of talent in our particular industry has been always a problem. You know, and I think some of the studies that I've seen where the gap of the age, from an age point of view, that there is no next generation to replace a lot of the next wave of retirees. You know, but I'd like to change topics for a little bit because we both work both have involvement with smaller companies. So, how will the small business community have to change their business model with the advent of, not today, but certainly in the next few years, we really have to start thinking about how AI is going to influence our business model?
I think small businesses should embrace it. For the near term, I see mostly upside, which is that I think for a small business, your biggest challenges are scale. It's how do I scale up to go after bigger projects? I mean, not even bigger projects, even to go after kind of smaller projects. Or how do I scale up my staff? I mean, we don't stop recruiting, because the next project comes along, we need to have people there. So I think what AI does is it potentially softens, it lets you do some peak shaving, I guess, in terms of kind of what staffing you need. I think it doesn't replace people in-house. What it does is allow them to work more and complete more. Like Boston Consulting Group and Harvard Business School did a study last year with consultants. They introduced them to ChatGPT. This is ChatGPT 4 at the time. And they had a control group that didn't get it, that didn't get the ChatGPT, and then another group they trained on it. The group that was trained on it was faster, completed more tasks, and had 40% higher quality than the control group. And that, once again, that doesn't mean you cut your staff. That means suddenly now you have more of a buffer to scale.
Well, I guess I was thinking more in the line of, let's say, some of the areas, specific disciplines that I've heard being potential targets, such as scheduling, such as cost estimating, such as inspection. Our company, for example, those are our core services, know. So if AI is going to be able to dramatically affect the way that you execute that, I assume that there has to be some sort of thought process as to not only how do you adapt it, but what does it mean to your bottom line?
Yeah. I mean, some services will certainly be affected. I mean, you brought up inspections. I think about one of the first really compelling machine learning, AEC machine learning solutions I saw was Thornton Tomasetti Core Studio developed it. And there's a bunch of other solutions out there for this as well. But bridge inspections used to be a person kind of hanging off the side of the bridge from a rope, and they would take pictures and they would measure cracks. Now you fly a drone up there, and then there's a piece of machine learning software that finds every single crack, compares it, because you fly the drone every month, compares it to last month, labels them green, yellow, red. And that's a job that used to be, not a full-time job necessarily for somebody, but pretty close, and now it's replaced by machine learning. So I do think, once again, there are some niche skill sets that are kind of getting phased out. I think a lot of the other work that we do is, I don't want to say it's manual, but it's very relationship based. I mean, generating a schedule is one thing. Having a conversation with your scheduler, a collaborative conversation, is something that I don't picture AI replacing anytime soon. No. Maybe you can be like, hey, I'm doing a 5-story high-rise with an underground parking garage, and AI will pump out, that schedule. But that conversation you have with the scheduler, like, oh, but what's this mean if I have to change the trucking routes and things like that? It's not there yet. So I think it kind of comes down. I always think of the example of what streaming did to music, right? It suddenly made. We went from a thing where CD sales was huge, and that's where you made all your money, to suddenly, like Beyonce does 1 billion streams and gets like $100. And the change in it came from suddenly touring and live performances became a much higher value. And I think that's going to remain true across industries, in particular for the AEC. I mean, when I go after projects, our value proposition at NTech is that when we go after projects, we're setting you up with this AEC professional. When we submit resumes, there's a picture of a human's face in the corner of the resume, and that's how we win. We don't win because I'm $10 cheaper than the next person.
Yeah.
So.
Or at least you hope not.
At least I hope not. Yeah, I mean, we do try to be price competitive, but it's much more of a like this. You would hire this person if you could.
Why don't you share with the audience a recent project that you worked on with AI application and lessons learned?
Yeah, absolutely. I think something that we're working on right now is we're trying to build our own RAG pipeline. RAG is retrieval augmented generation. So, and I'm like the worst person to get super technical on these things, but I'll try to get a little technical. What RAG is that you have LLMs. Could be any number of LLMs. Could be Claude. Could be Llama. Could be, ChatGPT. And that is this sort of big general purpose consumer LLM, right? You then have the ability to, on a local server, feed in your own documents that give you more specific answers based on those documents. And that's kind of called the RAG pipeline. So then now when I put my prompt in, I get the larger LLM, which is telling me how to do syntax and some general kind of feature, references to the world. And then there's the specifics, which could be things like contracts, proposals, what have you. For us, it's proposals. So what we're working on right now is putting all of our proposals in. My group alone did 78 proposals last year, submitted 78 proposals. We do a couple hundred proposals a year. So we have this massive library. So I can feed those in, and then I can do a prompt that says, hey, I have this project coming up. It's got this scope, the following scope tasks. It's for this client, let's say. Here's the public RFP. And then it gives me a first draft of what that proposal looks like. We're still very early into it. I think lessons learned, I would say, one is you have to talk to IT first, because the first thing that came up for us as IT was, the RAG plugin that we're using called Docker has a lot of permissions and things like this. This is a big problem with a lot of these AI tools. They tend to kind of sweep across all of your permissions, so IT is going to have a problem with that. So it's immediately, can we build this out on a virtual machine? Can we build this out in a sandbox to kind of test this? We're not there yet with it, but we're getting to where we're kind of having first drafts with this. And I would say too, I mean, my general approach to AI is lower your expectations. If it takes care of a first draft, that's amazing. You just saved me 2 hours. That's a huge win for me. I'm not looking for AI to replace our proposal lead. I'm looking for AI to help to get rid of that kind of tedious first step that my proposal.
What are your thoughts on some of the ethical issues with AI implementation?
I mean, as it pertains to AEC, I think, I don't know if copyright is the same as ethics, but you end up with an issue of whose idea is it and where the ideas are coming from. I attended a conference, I think it was called Advancing Computational Design, I believe, back in March. And all the architects were presenting were all using the same image generating tool. Evolve Lab creates it. I think it's called Veris. And it's like Midjourney, and you put your model in there and you say, I want it to be sunset in Miami, and then it makes it, and then you run it through a bunch of iterations, and suddenly renderings become very easy. Now, the question of where is the LLM getting, how many images is it consuming to give you that? Is it consuming somebody else's renderings? It gets even fuzzier, or it's more of a gray area when you get into ideation, where you're just sort of saying like, hey, I want to do a high-rise, multi-unit residential in this place and put trees on it, make it in a modern style, make it look like Zaha Hadid. That becomes a real issue of, what's considered copyright. And then additionally, I think legally we don't even really know who gets sued in that scenario. OpenAI, I don't know if they still have this policy, but earlier this year they had a policy that said that they would settle these lawsuits. I don't know that that's still their policy, but That to me is a big ethical thing, is whose idea is it? Because it used to be, I mean, we were all looking at magazines and ourselves kind of regurgitating what we saw in the magazines and making designs. But now that a machine is doing it,
So, I don't think we're anywhere near the scare part of AI replacing people's jobs.
I agree. Yeah,
You do?
I agree. Yeah, I think I mean, I think there's going to be some niche jobs that you'll probably see. I mean, there's been a lot of talk lately. I mentioned that thing about how coding's gotten much easier, become much easier. And so there's talk about like, oh, do I still want to be a computer science major? Probably still a good idea to be a computer science major, but I do see that having a real impact. I mean, as a business, we don't have in-house developers, and I don't know that I would get in-house developers now, because I think between GitHub Copilot and Devin and some of these other tools, I don't necessarily need that next level of coding that I thought I needed 2 years ago. I think there's areas of the industry that are very inefficient, that are very manual, and I mean, once again, that kind of back office sort of work. I'm not talking about in the field. We're nowhere near to having a robot that's swinging a hammer. But there are areas of the industry like document control, for instance, that is an incredibly manual, borderline analog process. I mean, it's, we're not necessarily we are still using the paper, but it's, even when you're not using the paper, you're just flipping through PDFs. Mm-hmm. That looks like, as an information retrieval problem, which is what AI is particularly good at, that is ripe for a solution. And there's actually there's a startup that launched last year called Trunk Tools that's tackling that right now with, what if I just sat on top of Procore and suddenly you had an LLM that was fine-tuned to your drawing set and your contract set and your submittals.
So, do you see a common vision evolving in terms of the direction that AI may go in the future?
I'm not to sidestep the question. I'll do a sidestep and then I'll come back to it. My sidestep is I'm kind of a cynic in terms of the industries, at least the U.S. industries, appetite for collective action. I mean, there have been some amazing things that you've seen come out of like Build Smart and the AGC BIM Forum, for instance. But in general, I'm kind of like, I would love for them to see them come together, especially around data transparency, benchmarks, really basic stuff that just has to do with construction information that's out there. But I don't see that happen. Now, what I would like to see happen is some more of that transparency. A friend of mine, Phil Bernstein from Yale and previously from Autodesk, proposed an idea of an industry data trust, which I think is a really great idea, and I'd love to see somebody put this into, I don't know who's would do this, but the data trust works that you build out a kind of neutral platform where you host project data or maybe even benchmark data. Each organization has kind of a local app that anonymizes their data, so strips it of anything that could get anybody in trouble in terms of data privacy, but also strips it of anything that could make it so like, oh, that's what Turner Construction's doing? Well, I'm Skanska, now I know I need to do this. But so strips that away so you can get to just usable data that doesn't hurt anybody.
Right.
Upload that to the trust, and then suddenly we have a database that's like, lawyers have a public database of case law. Doctors have a public database of diagnoses, common diagnoses. So something like that. I would love to see that common data trust happen. I don't know what it takes for that to happen, but that would be a huge step because, and I should have mentioned this at the beginning, structured data is what we really need to take advantage of AI.
Make it readable.
Make it readable, yeah.
But again, as someone who's been in this industry for 40 years, and I see very little improvement in how we deliver projects.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, and we have such a large infrastructure initiative that it would just seem common sense to look at, have a sort of a dedicated body that's just focused on what are the typical problems that occur on a project and how AI could help resolve this, because it's not proprietary. The problems are common. It's planning, design, construction, and closeout. So on every project, so it doesn't matter which delivery system you're using or the type of project that you're doing. It's still the same issues, but we just don't seem to have a mindset of trying to really drill down to the areas that can have the biggest benefit in terms of improving project performance. We talk a lot about it, and we come up with new techniques or new systems but the end result is still the same.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think looking at my experience in BIM, it's owners who really lead the innovation there. I mean, there's always, you can kind of think of kind of a spectrum of like bleeding edge, let's say contractors, architects, engineers, sort of, the middle that's trying to keep up, and then laggards on one end, let's say. But the moment the Port Authority puts a BIM guideline out and puts on their contract, I mean, when I was on LaGuardia, we had, I think, the first version of the Port Authority BIM guideline in 2013. The moment that happens, we all scramble to satisfy that contract requirement. And when the Port Authority a couple years later moves ahead and says, also you need to laser scan every square inch of this project, we scramble to figure out how we're going to do that. And suddenly we're buying SLAM scanners and everything else. And that's where my optimism lives. And at least here in New York, you see amazing leadership from the Port Authority, EDC with their circular design and construction guidelines that came out, I think, just last year. DEP, I mean, I'm going to quote a lot of public agencies, but that's where it's going to happen. And I think it's also from a data privacy and data security standpoint, at the end of the day, it's really going to be their data. So I think it'll be up to them to determine it. Now, whether they all come together and say, DOT, DEP, we all need to make this happen, I don't know. I haven't seen much of that. I mean, you look at the UK, who, as a nation, came up with a BIM mandate. I just haven't seen that kind of coordination in the US.
That's kind of what's needed, though.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
I mean, that also, maybe that's another place of optimism. I mean, AI is very, very visible to the federal government, and there's an awareness of data guidelines for this that I think you may actually see some movement there that could end up being, affecting us all, just across all industries, not just AEC.
Well, Pierce, thank you.
Thank
you.
you.
This has been a great conversation. I hope that the audience has appreciated this opportunity of hearing from a thought leader what's happening in this very new and dynamic industry and technology of AI. We look forward to the next podcast with our audience, and in the interim, if you have any questions or if you want to do any follow-up, please feel free to contact us, and we'll be more than happy to relay it. Okay. Pierce, thank you.
Thanks so much.